everybody. I am recording 2 of these right now. I just finished with my Octedgar Allan Poeber Part 1 video, and I was looking at every single poem and every single short story and the essay as well, and then I realized that the video is going to be super long, so I split it in half. This is going to be the short story slash essay video. So if you are looking for the poems, there is another video for that. This might start off a little weird. I haven't edited it yet, so but hopefully this will make it a little bit easier. I'm going to put all the timestamps below where I talk about all of the various short stories and also the essay, so hopefully you can find it pretty easily. I just wanted to make sure that everybody that did participate, even if they didn't read every single piece, still has some discussion to come to, at least in my videos. So hope that makes sense to everybody. If you're still feeling really hyped about Edgar Allan Poe, you can check out the poems video after this, but for now, this is going to be the short stories and the essay. Enjoy. The short stories. These short stories were exactly what I was hoping for this read-along. Like I said, I am a total Poe noob, but just getting into these, it perfectly fit the October mood I was going for, and so let's just get right into them here. The first short story we read for this week was The Masque of the Red Death, which was originally published in 1842 and was the only short story this week that was not written in first person. Now, I'll get into that a little bit later, but let's dive a little bit deeper into this one. So it starts out describing this dangerous plague called the Red Death, and it's making a way around town, so Prince Prospero and his wealthy pals decide to hole up because of poor people. Now they all gather in Prince Prospero's abbey, and one night to entertain themselves, they decide to have a masquerade that spans 7 rooms of that abbey, and each room sports a different color. The last room is black with a deep blood color shining in from the stained glass windows. There is a clock in this room that chimes every single hour, and it's such a chilling sound that everybody stops what they're doing immediately, even the orchestra. And when you're at a masquerade, that's kind of an important piece of the party, and so when they stop, you know something's going down. The pacing of the short story was great, passages almost repeated between chimes, but it was really at a faster pace to make you feel that build up to midnight. Once midnight chimes, and you know that was a long chime with 12 of them going off and everybody getting dead quiet, but at that midnight chime, there's a blood-spattered robe that appears with a mask that's resembling a corpse, and it makes its way through every single room. The prince is ordering everybody to stop this thing, but nobody is, and so the prince pulls out his dagger, but once the masked robe gets to the last dark room where the prince is, the prince tries to attack it, but then ends up turning around and looking at it, and then just dies. And so that at that point, everybody really snaps out of their fear and goes to attack this masked figure, but when they unmask it, there's nothing there. It turns out it just is the Red Death, and everyone dies, and thank God. The last line really sums it up, and darkness and decay in the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. And I was pretty happy about it. The guests kind of suck for leaving everybody out there, but the thing here, I had mentioned, I think so far, it's kind of been a long video, but the fact that Poe really doesn't like allegory, and so he just has always said that any allegorical tale is just not doing its job. You should really be able to tell your stories and recite your poems without having these external meanings. And so is it allegorical? Maybe not, but it kind of seems like it is because of the different rooms and where this masked figure starts from. But that's also just has to do a lot with the symbolism, and it could just be a spooky tale, but that does come straight from Poe's mouth, so I'm curious what you all think about it. Regardless, the pacing was great, and the mood made it a fun read. Next, we have the Cask of Amontillado. I know somebody got on me for the pronunciation of that in the reading list video, so I guess I hope that's right. But it was first published in 1846. It was written in first person, which I really loved. I've talked about this in past videos, but I love unreliable narrators, and I think that happens a lot with these first-person stories because you don't know how much bias is there, if the person is crazy. I just think that it adds a lot more excitement to fictional tales. And so it was just great getting into the character's head a little bit here. The narrator, Montresor, is pissed about 1,000 injuries and the creeping in of insults from Fortunato, but he claims that the two of them are friends. And so it doesn't really get all that specific overall. It just kind of says that, and he's mad about it. And naturally, he just wants to kill him. Montresor tricks Fortunato into going into his vaults to discern if he was swindled after buying a cask of Amontillado. He needs somebody with a good palate, and so he kind of plays to Fortunato's strengths as a wine connoisseur to get him to come down to the cellar so his plan can really come into play. He gets him drunk on the way down, but something that's really interesting is he keeps asking Fortunato if he wants to turn around because of his cough. And he keeps saying that because the dampness is going to get worse in the cellar, and it's kind of a weird thing, because what if Fortunato said, yeah, I do want to turn around, then is the plan just over? He can't be like, well, let's try and go back again. You know, it gets kind of weird if he starts to kind of force this issue over and over and over. And so that was something that tore me here, because they were technically described as friends. But you do start to see hints of what would have made Montresor pissed off overall. They get to a point where Fortunato does this big gesture, and he asks Montresor if he knows what it is, and it happens to be a symbol for the masonry. And so when you think of the name Fortunato, it probably is supposed to represent the fact that Fortunato had a lot of fortune go his way, and it seemed to play into the fact that Montresor didn't necessarily have a lot of good fortune going his way. And so maybe the fact that Fortunato was admitted into the masonry, and the fact that his family was probably, Fortunato's family was probably doing pretty well in life, that could start to make him jealous and really would feed into this desire to get some revenge, I guess, on his friend. One of the other interesting things that came up was the Montresor family coat of arms, which was a golden foot on a blue background stepping on a snake whose fangs are in the foot. And so the question I'm curious about, I'm hoping that a lot of you weigh in on this, who's the snake here? But I just found this story to be really interesting because there's a lot to analyze with Montresor's psychology. It's just a fact that even at the end, after he takes care of the deed and lays all the bricks to trap Fortunato down in this cellar, he has a line here, "My heart grew sick, ... on account of the dampness of the catacombs." And so he has a couple moments where he almost seems like he's feeling some remorse, but then turns it around. It's just like, you know what? It's not a big deal. And he's telling the story to somebody else. And so this is 50 years later is what he says here at the end. And then in a different language, the translation, the last line of the story here, he yells out, "May he rest in peace." And so again, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I think that that psychology is just so ambiguous, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that this will be a fun one to really discuss a little bit deeper as we get into the next batch of poems and short stories for part 2. Next, we have The Murders in the Rue Morgue, first published in 1841 and recognized as the first modern detective story. This story was really a jumping off point for Edgar Allan Poe to dive deeper into this style of story writing because it was pretty popular at the time, and eventually this led to his influence in mystery being so great that the Mystery Writers of America named their award show the Edgar Allan Poe Awards, or the Edgars. I thought the story was so cool. It's pretty much Sherlock Holmes before Sherlock Holmes, all the way down to the sidekick that documents what's going on. Like with John Watson in the Sherlock Holmes stories, we do have this unnamed narrator that kind of leads you along this journey to really a true mystery. In fact, there was even a silent film adaptation in 1908 where they replaced, sorry about this if it's wrong, Dupin with Sherlock, and it was called Sherlock Holmes and the Great Murder Mysteries. So this was so much like Sherlock Holmes that they wanted to put Sherlock into the story. I think that says a lot there. I loved the mind reading moment at the beginning with Dupin where he comments on the narrator's thought processes, even though neither of them had talked in 15 minutes or so, and then him explaining his analyzations on how he knew what he was thinking. It was very creative, and that moment in particular really convinced me that Poe was a smart man. He had a lot of references to a lot of different subject matters, and I think that that is kind of important for good writers, at least in my opinion. We all can write about really generic stories, but the more specific you get, the more differentiated it can be from other people's stories on similar subject matters. And so that was super impressive to me. The one point where it really did kind of slow down was with the newspapers where they were getting all the testimonies of all these different people, and it was just giving a lot of detail, and it was still cool because those clues were used later on, but at the time it just felt like it was going on, and I don't know if that's actually historically accurate as far as murders went. I haven't read a lot of newspapers from that time period, but it seemed like it was quite a lot of detail, and obviously since this was an early attempt at this style, there is some room for refinement where you could get these clues by having the detective ask somebody else, and it kind of works its way from there, which does happen in a lot of stories later on. But other than that, the story was really great. This story also introduced the big reveal followed by the deductions to that conclusion, which that trope has carried all the way to modern day, even to the likes of Scooby-Doo, where they always pull the mask off of whoever committed the crime, and then they kind of explain what they did for the rest of the episode. But that did happen here, not necessarily with the mask, but with the fact that they solved the crime and then it all got explained later. So it was cool to see that start here. I don't want to spoil the ending. I don't know how many of you actually read this one because it is fairly long. I think this was the longest one for this week. But you should definitely read it at some point because it is such an influential work. And it was pretty fun. I mean, like I said, there were some rough patches where maybe some of it wouldn't be believable, maybe some of it could have used some refinement, but overall, it was a fun read. So if you didn't get to it now, some point in the future, you definitely should. Lastly, for the short stories, we had The Black Cat, which was published in 1843. This was another one in first person, and I thought that this was another fascinating look into an unreliable narrator. I mean, the guy was kind of crazy. I picked up on a couple of things online, but people did seem to say that he seemed to be more into animals than people, and there were also a couple of lines that kind of highlighted the fact that he might be mad, and a couple of them are, I neither expect nor solicit belief, mad would I be to expect it, and then even later on he says, yet mad I am not, but you don't really know. He's kind of compromised himself. A couple details later on also compromise the fact that he is a completely sane person. And then you get into some pretty crazy details here. First of all, you start off with him telling you that he is sentenced to death, so you know something's going down here. But he has a bunch of animals that he gets with his wife who kind of shares that love for animals. And then he gets a cat who they happen to name Pluto, which is kind of weird because if you know a little bit about mythology, that is the name of the god of the underworld, so that's not a great sign there. He also acknowledges that black cats are generally thought to be witches, so it's just not setting up for this cat to be a good part of his life. But regardless, at the beginning, he does say that he loves the cat the most and has a good relationship with it for a while, but then he starts to explore his alcoholism that leads him to his anger, his removal of this cat's eyeball, the murder of the cat by hanging it. And so with that, there are some details of Edgar Allan Poe kind of having a problem with alcohol as well. So some of this might have been written from experience. I don't know if the black cat was. There is some records out there that showed he did have a black cat, or at least a cat of some sort. I'm pretty sure it was a black cat, so who knows how deep this goes. After the murder of the cat, the house burns down. Inexplicably, one wall stands with the outline of this cat. And so, obviously, there is some magic going on, and this cat isn't done with its part of the story. He soon gets a second cat that starts to follow him around everywhere. At first, he likes it, but then it's at his feet all day. At night, he keeps waking up and it's over his face, and that would kind of feel like a curse. Even if it's a cute animal, if it keeps doing that all the time, it would ruin your sleep. You wouldn't be able to do anything well. And so with that, he also starts to notice this white spot that is also on this cat's chest. It starts to change as the story goes along, and at one point he even says it starts to resemble the gallows. And so is this foreshadowing for his eventual death? It doesn't explain that he's going to get hung at the beginning. It just says that he is sentenced to die. So is it foreshadowing, or is he just crazy? Eventually, he just gets so fed up with a cat, he grabs an axe to kill it, but his wife gets in the way just to save the cat because she loves animals and isn't experiencing what he is, and he gets so mad that he ends up taking the axe and murdering her. And it's crazy. He doesn't care. He just goes about his life, and he ends up hiding her behind this wall that he took down and built back up to hide her from any people that would be coming in to search for her, because obviously she's just gone. You're not going to murder somebody and no one's going to go looking for them. And so there are search parties that he kind of gets around. He doesn't have any evidence laying around. He has hidden the body and he's almost in the clear. But at the very end, when they're almost done with their last search, he's like, oh, my house is built super well. Taps the wall with a cane, and there's this loud screech. Turns out the second cat was in there. He describes its eye of fire. It really has this ominous imagery, and I just really liked this short story for that. I don't know how deep anybody else looked into this thing, but this was probably the most fun for Halloween. It kept the theme, and it was a great short story to read for part 1 of Octedgar Allan Poeber. Oh, Lord. Last but not least, we're getting into the essay. I don't need to get into this too much. I just wanted to include a light essay because I know that there was a lot of other stuff to read. This video is probably going to be super long, so props to you if you've made it this far. But for Philosophy of Furniture, it does get into some nonfiction and shows that Poe really has a passion for fashion. My main takeaway here is that Poe is an absolute savage. He has so many lines in here that are just like total barbs to anybody that might be reading this and is employing any of these don'ts of his fashion advice for their homes. And so some of them here, he says, like, flickering unquiet lights are sometimes pleasing to children and idiots, always so. He also talks about the use of glare in the home and says no one having both brains and eyes will use it. And it's just like, damn, Poe, chill out. But I did find myself chuckling. I just thought it was funny that he did have such an opinion on all of this stuff. And I'm moving pretty soon, so maybe I'll have to take some more notes on this and decorate my house in the Poe style. I think the other essays that I chose for the next 2 parts of Octedgar Allan Poeber are going to be a little more substantial, and so those will be pretty exciting to read. I just thought this one was kind of fun and will get us into his nonfiction style. But with that, I'm cutting it off. Thank you so much for sticking around, and thanks for participating if you did. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your thoughts in the comments. I know not everybody watched this whole thing, but even if you watched a little bit of it, thank you. It'll be exciting to get into the next 2 parts, especially with part 3. A lot of Edgar Allan Poe's most famous works are going to be for that October 30th reading date. But for now, you can go back and check the reference video to see what we're reading for part 2. I'm really excited. I've enjoyed all of this so far. If you know anybody else that would be interested in reading along for Octedgar Allan Poeber, let me know or let them know. I think having the group be as large as possible would just be good for all of us. I think it's helpful, especially for some of these more dense poems and short stories. It's just nice to have other people to kind of bounce ideas off of. So, like I said, let me know if there's anybody else you can think of. But with that, I'm signing off. This has been over an hour. I think the videos will definitely get shorter as we go along, but thanks for hanging out today, and I will see you on October 20th. Have a great Octedgar Allan Poeber. See ya.